out today. This is our 9th annual Anthony Mascioli Rainbow Dialogues. I am Shalise Worthy. I am the Historical Services Coordinator here for the Rochester Public Library, and I am co-chair, along with Steve Jaros, of the Shoulders to Stand On LGBTQIA+ Archive. First and foremost, I want to thank our presenters for sharing their stories and their time and energy with us today. I'd also like to thank the Friends and Foundation of Rochester Public Library for their ongoing support of the archive and Rainbow Dialogues. They're a founding sponsor of Rainbow Dialogues, and we couldn't do it without them. And a huge thank you to our planning committee who helped make this event happen, and also to our community sponsors tabling here today. If you get a chance, please stop by and say hi to them. I'd like to take a moment to give some updates on what is happening with the Shoulders to Stand On archive. We just wrapped up a grant from the Rochester Area Community Foundation to document underrepresented aspects of Rochester's LGBTQIA+ history. Our team of volunteers and contract employees worked really hard to provide outreach to the community, and we were able to incorporate some new collections into the archive. We're just very pleased with how the grant came out and grateful for their work. And Katie over here at the table, I'm going to embarrass Katie a little bit. They've been one of our volunteers and contract employees, so we're very grateful for them. This year, we will launch a mobile preservation project. It was generously funded by Dr. Bill Valenti, and through this project, we will visit community centers and individuals to create digital copies of their historical material. This allows us to make those materials available to the greater community while allowing individuals and organizations to retain their original materials. As a part of this project, we will also preserve community member stories through oral history interviews. If you are interested in learning more about how to preserve your own legacy, there is a guide to preserving your personal collections at the registration table. Or if you're interested in hosting a mobile preservation event, please grab my business card. I would love to hear from you. At this time, I am going to invite my Shoulders to Stand On co-chair Steve Jaros to the podium.
Hello, everyone. My name is Steve Jaros. My pronouns are he, him, and it's my pleasure also to welcome you to our program today. Whether you are part of the LGBTQIA+ community, an ally, a member of the larger community, or joining us online, we're glad to have you with us. The Rainbow Dialogues Initiative pays tribute to the remarkable history of queer activism in Rochester. As we learn about the courage, resilience, and challenge to bigotry that has always been part of our movement, we'll also apply the lessons we've learned to the daunting issues facing us today. Our goal is to build upon this rich legacy and inspire each other to continue the fight for freedom in a democracy and in a nation largely under siege. Unfortunately, much of our history remains hidden, due in part to our own bigotry and misunderstanding. Patriarchy and white supremacy are not unique to the queer community. It is everywhere. But we are deeply committed to change that. To be truly inclusive, we need to hear, document, and preserve the stories of marginalized groups among us. The intersections of faith, race, class, gender, and gender expression, Native experiences, the disability community, as well as those in the military, government, and all walks of lives, are crying out to be heard. This is our mission at the Shoulders to Stand On project and the Rainbow Dialogues. With your help, we can achieve it. There is much that we can build upon. It starts with relationships, one-on-one, and together. Our hope is that during the break today, you will reach out and introduce yourself to somebody who is new to you. Make that connection. It may end up being a very long-lasting and wonderful association. So I'd like to start by appreciating the groups that are tabling here. Say hello to Katie and the folks who are representing Rat House Publishing. They are reintroducing the empty closet. Can you imagine? That's worthy of our applause for sure. We also have representatives from Rock Rainbow Union. Jimmy and Tess are here, and I see Tim's there as well. They have a wonderful collection of monthly programs, education, the arts, and community forums. It's well worth a visit. There's also information, as Shalise has mentioned, on the Shoulders to Stand On initiative, the Endowed Fund, and the oral initiative that's already been shared. I want to make sure that as we build this community, that you are aware of some of the other programs that are available to us in Rochester. Are you aware of the Queer Vets Project operating out of Geneseo? I'm going to embarrass my husband Marvin and ask him to raise his hand. Marvin, if you would, because he's familiar with it and is one of those vets who's already been interviewed. The spring and fall series of the Image Out, produced each year along with Image Out Right. We have the Landmark Association's efforts to document Rochester's historic LGBTQ plus community sites. We have the Rock Rainbow Seniors monthly programs, including an initiative with Writers and Books in their Legacy Project. There is LGBTQIA plus Together. Boy, we have Wave Women. We have the NGMT, Next Generation of Men in Transition, not to mention queer businesses in our midst. We have the Rochester Gay Men's Chorus and the Women's Community Chorus. These aren't all the groups that are here today, but I mention them because the more we become aware, the more we become engaged. And the more we become engaged, the more we build relationships. Relationships build and preserve the community. The people in the room need you. The world needs you. Open your hearts. Be inspired. Thank you. It's my pleasure now to introduce our, if you're still awake, to introduce our panel facilitator. Bridget Fleming is a PhD candidate in the Visual and Culture Studies program at the University of Rochester. Her research interests include contemporary art, feminism, and experimental film. Her dissertation explores the role of confessional speech in feminist documentary film and video. In collaboration with the Visual Studies Workshop, she's building a website devoted to the history of 1970s grassroots feminist and media activism in Rochester, New York. The website places oral history, interviews, annotated videos, and archival ephemera in conversation to share this untold history. Recent curatorial projects include the group exhibitions Sex, Labor in November and December of 2024, the Trans Futurity, August and September of 25, in the Hartnett Gallery at the University of Rochester. Now the best part is, despite all these academic accomplishments, you will appreciate Bridget's warmth and enthusiasm. I'm happy to introduce Bridget to you.
Hello, everybody. Hi. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's very exciting to be here today to share with you all this local history. Steve and Shalise, thank you for introducing us. I did want to share a little bit more about the project that I'm doing with this local history. And if any of you are interested, I would love to rope you in. So come find me afterward if you feel inspired. So the goal of our panel today is to share with you all this really beautiful and interesting and exciting local feminist activism. I think we all know that Rochester is a very special place in terms of the history here, and particularly the activist history. And I just learned about this history about a year ago. So we're going to be talking about this group called the Rochester Women Against Violence Against Women. And while we're talking today, we're often going to be referring to this group as RAVWA. That's the acronym they go by. It took me a long time to learn. They all used to make fun of me because I can never say it right. So when you hear RAVWA, we're talking about this group that was active in Rochester between 1976 to 1982-83. And two of our panelists today were part of this group, and it's such an honor to be in conversation with them, and also, to have them here to speak about their experiences. And they're still very active today in Rochester, in the activist community. So our goal is, one, to tell you about this history and help you appreciate it and just get curious about it. And then our other goal is to bring this history in conversation with activism today in Rochester. And I think today, being a No King's Day protest, that I drove through on the way here, is a fitting day for this conversation to be had. And we will have a Q&A, so we really look forward to your questions. We want you to engage with us. So, before I jump in, I want to introduce, or have our panelists introduce themselves. So, I will have Elizabeth introduce herself, and then have the other two panelists jump in.
I guess you can take them out. Okay. Hi, my name's Elizabeth Sapir. I'm a PhD candidate in the History Department at the University of Rochester, as well as an adjunct instructor in the Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies program. My current research focuses on surrogacy, reproductive technologies, and feminism in the late 20th century.
I'm Sylvia Gasoy. That's all. No, I was part of RAVWA.
That's hardly all there is in an introduction of Sylvia Gasoy. I won't start. It'll take a long time. I'm Catherine Dennison, also a member of RAVWA, and continuing to be as much of a troublemaker as I'm allowed.
While we figure out maybe I'll just have it. Hey, I think that worked. Wow, thank you, Shalise. So, I'm going to open it up and have a conversation between myself and the panelists, but before I do that, I'm just going to offer you all a very bare bones overview of RAVWA, what this organization is, right? And I'm also going to share with you a little bit about how Elizabeth and I have started to create this oral history project with Sylvia and Catherine and some of the other elders who are in RAVWA, and how we, the things I'm going to show you, the documents, how those things we learned about them. So to start, as I said, RAVWA was active in Rochester between 1976 and 1982. And they formed and primarily were, doing actions in the streets, doing workshops, etc., around and in response to what they perceived as violent representations of women in media, whether that was advertising or films or any just kind of like popular media. And I'm going to have Elizabeth share with you all a little bit more about this moment of feminist history to contextualize why RAVWA is forming in this moment, right? Because there are very particular cultural and social things happening in the late 70s that lead women across the United States to form different chapters of women against violence against women, right? So the one in Rochester was not unique, although it played an interesting role in this larger history that was taking place across the United States. So on the screen right now, you'll see some paper ephemera from a conference that happened in San Francisco in 1978 called Feminist Perspectives on Pornography. This was in November of 1978. And I want to say this might have been where one of the first Take Back the Night marches are. Have any of you heard of the Take Back? Yeah. So I'm about to share some images from a Take Back the Night march that RAVWA activists did in Rochester. But Take Back the Night marches really emerge out of these women against violence against women groups. And so two of the activists in RAVWA with Sylvia and Catherine, Marg Hall and Martha Geever, they were the two leaders of the organization. They went to this conference and shared what they were doing on the streets in Rochester. So I pulled this little image from the conference proceedings to show you how they were articulating what RAVWA was doing in Rochester. So I'm going to read this. So Marg and Martha were leading a workshop at this feminist conference in San Francisco, and they say, this workshop will focus on direct action against pornography, the educational quality of certain kinds of sabotage, nonviolence, guerrilla action versus civil disobedience, being effective, considerations when involving others, what to do if you get caught, etc. The second half of the workshop will be a skills sharing session. Women are encouraged to bring and share documentation of anti-porn actions from their communities. So I say this to just kind of give you all a sense of how they were working nationally across the country, right? And now I want to emphasize, and I'm going to show you all some images from their archive, because last summer, Elizabeth and I were given the archive of Ravwa from someone who is unfortunately not here today, but is a pillar of this community and is a fabulous person named Nancy Rosin. And to this day, Nancy is teaching activists with Mona Jimenez, who's also in the audience here. They are teaching activists how to video record ICE agents and doing raids. So, I mean, like they're, still on the streets doing the work. It's really amazing. Anyway, Nancy gave us this archive last summer and says, I don't know what to do with it. Do you want to just figure out what to do with it? And I'm like, sure. So I start going through it with Nancy, and there's like all these images, right? You can see Sylvia in this image. Here's some pictures from a Take Back the Night march they did. This is right across from where the Jiva Theater is today. And all of this paper ephemera I'm about to show you were in a box that, Nancy sits me down and starts telling me all about it. And she says, Ravwa is mostly queer women, and they're very active, and they're meeting all the time, and they're going around Rochester, and they're putting up posters, and they're doing, silly, protest actions. So there's three main things that Ravwa was doing in Rochester. So they were doing these direct actions, protesting in the streets. They were also doing kind of like prank or silly kinds of activism around what would have been the porn district in Rochester. So in the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of porn magazine stores, or, if you drive down Monroe today, you see that defunct movie theater. That was a porn theater, and hopefully it could become something again someday. It's such a cool building. But they would, I don't know if you can see this picture very well, but they would do these silly things where they would go and do a die-in, what they called it. If they were playing what's called a snuff film, a film that's depicting the violent dismemberment of a woman for the pleasure of a film. These women would go and, do this silly prank to protest the screening of this film. They would make posters and they would put them up around town. So this is a porn bookstore or magazine store that used to be across from the Eastman, Kodak Hall, the Eastman School of Music, where the YMCA is today. There was this store right across the street from it, and the women in Ravwa put up posters on the door protesting their selling of pornography magazines, which we can talk more about, because Ravwa was not necessarily anti-porn, but they were anti-violence against women and the portrayal of violence against women in media. And it's a little bit of a fine distinction, but it's one that's important to point out. They would put these stickers on magazines in porn stores. They would go in. So you can see that humor was a really big part of their activism. They would deface these advertisements, these billboards. This is one of the posters they would wheat paste around town that says "Smash Patriarchy." This is kind of a humorous poster that they made. So I actually printed out some copies of these images, and they're in the back. If you want to take them later, you're welcome to, if you want to hold one in your hands just to see what it says, etc. Yeah, I'm going to let Sylvia and Catherine talk more to these posters. But yeah, so they were doing, putting up posters and direct actions across town. Then they're, also holding and hosting these self-defense workshops to try to teach women how to protect themselves if they are out. And, you know, as you'll see, media was such an important part of their activism, creating posters, creating documentary videos. So I'm going to share with you all today a clip of a video that some of these activists made about one of their actions at a local theater. This was a poster for a slideshow that used to go around to different universities and share a slideshow that had different images that they would use to educate and consciousness raise about the issues that they were concerned with. So that gives you a bit of an overview of this organization. Now, I want to turn it over to Elizabeth to contextualize a little bit more this moment of feminist history. And then I would love for Catherine and Sylvia to talk a little bit about, you know, your work in Ravwa, how you became involved, anywhere you want to start. So, Elizabeth, I can hand the mic to you.
Yeah, so, I mean, to begin, you know, this comes out of, most importantly, right, this comes out of the sort of 1960s, 1970s moment of activism, and the sort of like the revolutionary feeling that came from that moment, the civil rights and black power movement, the student and anti-war movements, and then by the late 60s, the radical feminist movement. And, you know, I'll let Sylvia and Catherine talk about the sort of like, the sort of revolutionary optimism of that moment, as they can probably speak to that better than I could. But I do want to point to a couple sort of big things that happened in the lead up that helped create the sort of conditions for the development of Ravwa. And the first of them was a 1957 Supreme Court case called Roth v. U.S., which greatly expanded which materials qualified for First Amendment protections. And this included specifically books, magazines, and films with sexual themes. And this led to numerous other court cases throughout the 1960s as well into the early 1970s that expanded all of these materials that could be included in with First Amendment protections, which sort of dramatically expanded sort of visual sort of pornography in films, in magazines, and in books. The other one is that in 1968, President Lyndon Johnson convened a presidential commission on pornography and obscenity. And in 1970, the commission published its report, and in the report, it said that at worst pornography was harmless, and at best it was a useful outlet for adults. And one of the things the report called for, most importantly in this context, is that it called for the repeal of all local, state, and federal statutes against the marketing of sexually explicit materials. And what these two things did was that it opened up a sort of cultural permissiveness around sexuality, around pornography, but it also led to the sort of explosion of marketing techniques that sort of, especially in the view of feminists who were in Women Against Violence Against Women, it led to the explosion of marketing centered around the sort of conflation of violence and sexuality. Perhaps most importantly, you know, and we'll talk about this a little later, is this black and blue billboard that comes out to advertise the Rolling Stones album Black and Blue, where it shows a woman bound, gagged, and bruised with the caption, "I'm black and blue for the Rolling Stones and I love it." And that's sort of served as one of the early sort of organizing catalysts for women against violence against women, first on the West Coast and then eventually nationally. The other thing that sort of comes out of this is sort of, or to keep in mind, I guess, is that this is in a moment where VCRs are still not sort of widely spread in households, right? And so in order to watch a film, most people were going to theaters, and this included pornography. And so following Johnson's report from his Presidential Commission on Pornography, you start to see pornographic films being shown in sort of mainstream theaters. And in particular, two films were really important in this, and that in Deep Throat and The Devil and Miss Jones, which were two pornographic films, which in the year that they were released actually were some of the highest grossing films of those years. And this opened up the moment where a film called Snuff comes into play. And Snuff was originally this sort of like budget Argentinian slasher film based loosely on Charles Manson and the murder of Sharon Tate. It doesn't get much traction once it's made, and then this other director comes in, Alan Shackleton, and decides to add an alternate 5-minute ending on it, which purported to show the murder and dismemberment of a woman. This gains it traction, especially as Shackleton sort of refuses. He gives it an X rating, at the same time bypassing the sort of standard rating practices of the Motion Picture Association, and refuses to answer any questions about Snuff's origins. And this gives it a sort of like infamy, where people are dying to get into it, and it gives it this awful tagline of the film that could only be made in South America where life is cheap. This ends up being one of the highest grossing films the year it comes out in 1976. And Snuff in particular is the one moment that Women Against Violence Against Women begins to organize out of, initially in the West Coast in California. And it was a bunch of different sort of radical feminist groups that organized to protest the screening of Snuff at a bunch of San Francisco theaters. And shortly after the protests that they organized against Snuff, they decide to sort of cohere an organized group, and that's what becomes Women Against Violence Against Women.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. A lot of material. Yeah. Well, what's the question? No. No. How to?
If you
okay. I had been doing activist work for a long time, and so when I joined, I guess it wasn't RAPWA at that point. It was a feminist group in probably 1977. I had just come to Rochester, a single mother, and anyway, I became very engaged with the women in the feminist group. I had never been in a group like that. And the first thing that I became aware of was the Smash Patriarchy poster that they made and posted all over the city, or part of the city. And then, yes, I had a problem with the word smash. I hadn't arrived there yet, but I did ultimately, and I think what we did mostly was making plans to show people what women experience here and in the world. And I think that was the main address of what we did. And it was very serious and also funny. We had a lot of fun also. especially wheat pasting, and putting up posters at adult bookshops, not young people, no. Anyway, and we did a number of actions. Do you want to talk about them? Talked about, well, things. One of the things we did that Catherine was very involved in, it was at RIT, and to speak to students and to teachers, educators, about rapes that had been committed on campus. And so, you want to? No? Go ahead.
There was a large gathering. It's a bit of a jump to go to that, because there's several things that I'd like to consider in between. Can we see the stretch of video leading to the arrests
Yes.
and so on before we get to? I think that would make more sense.
Okay. Should I? Do you want to?
Check.
Catherine, do you want to talk about the event and what happened, or would you like?
I'd like to say a couple things about it, and then I think Sylvia will have much more to say. I was a latecomer. I was in my pottery studio while a number of women were gathering and working as a group, as Sylvia says, when an event took place that I did not participate in. I'm so frustrated that I didn't know about it until later. This was an event at a theater that led to the arrest of a number of women I came to know and love. You'll see some video, and I'm not in that group of people. I came in later, but I came in like gangbusters, so I came to understand quite quickly what was involved, and it changed my life. So if we could see some of that, it would help.
Sure. Should I say a little bit about the event and what happened?
Sure, I didn't want to jump the gun here.
So, we could
yeah.
also just show the video and let people kind of...
I think that's powerful.
Let's
I think
do that.
it might
Okay,
be helpful.
okay. We're going to throw you all in, and then maybe we'll contextualize it after this this particular event by Bravo Activists. So this video was made by one of the main organizers in Ravo, Martha Geaver. And this documentary is now stewarded by Visual Studies Workshop, which is a gallery, an artist residency, a screening space, an archive in Rochester. It's a very important space. It just moved to King Street, and it's in the Susan B. Anthony neighborhood. I really encourage you all to go. There's a lot of videos about Ravo activism in their archive, and I created a list that you all can take home with you after this that has links so you can watch them if you're more interested. So VSW has digitized a lot of these videos, and they're available to watch for free online. So we're going to watch a video about this particular event, and then we'll talk more about it. So I'm going to show... Catherine, is that okay if I show like the first 5-6 minutes? Okay.
I think that'd be great.
Okay. Good.
And also just point out that it's on Vimeo.
Yes.
Under Visual Studies, so it's easy to see the entire thing, and I do recommend it. It's quite powerful.
Yes.
The shadows of their desire take the form of flickering light, murder, by knife, by razor, by strangulation, cunt meat eaten by a dog, and more of this. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Blood money. You pigs, you motherfuckers, he screamed at the women and children holding signs, the questions in the air being, who pays the price? Who reaps the profit? Who has the power? Who feels the pleasure? Who does the bleeding? Who sheds the blood? October 22nd, Rochester, New York, Holiday Cine, Snuff and Slasher, continuous from 2 p.m., made in South America where life is cheap. Manson-like gang does a lot of killing, ending with a Tate-like victim. Dagger plunges into pregnant belly, explodes, gushing blood, amniotic fluid. The cameras pull back. Film crew shown talking it over. Pretty blonde assistant agrees that it turns her on. The attractive director suggests a good fuck she sees. The crew is still filming. She protests, tries to get up. The director picks up a dagger. Blood, chopped fingers, arms, legs. River of blood flows from her mouth. He cuts her open, brandishes entrails and sex. Screams orgasmic conquest. Fade into blackness. It's doing good business. October 30th. 4 women arrested by vice officers. I'm a male chauvinist. According to police, smashed display case with a hammer, ripped out the poster of a woman slashed with scissors, chained shut the door. Snuff's run ends earlier than planned, but before it goes, the vice squad has a look. Rates it 4 stars, no genitalia showing, therefore it's not obscene. Torture and murder of women, legitimate entertainment. Assistant DA Avery tells the papers, we give more weight to the vice squad than to the average citizen. No chance DA's office will drop charges. We cannot condone violence under any circumstances.
Stop violence against women! Stop violence against women! Stop violence against women!
Some of us had met the theater owner, Cesar D'Agostino, at another demonstration. In June 1977, he had showed a movie called Nazi Love Camp. When we demonstrated in front of the theater, he lost his temper, struck me, and then called the police.
You have to move outside, okay? You're going to call the police, and you have to have a permit to do this.
Oh, they get permits to do this?
Yes.
Oh, I don't think so.
Right?
Oh, I don't think so.
This is our property. We're not doing this against our property.
Where do you live?
24 Strath Allen.
What is it?
24 Strath Allen.
Your date of birth?
21st June. June 21st, 47. On October 30th, 1977, Sylvia, Lee, Marg, and I were arrested, jailed, and charged with criminal mischief 3rd degree, a felony. That night, as we sat in jail, we watched our friends on the evening news demonstrating against snuff and in our support. Months later, we discovered that we had been arrested because someone had informed the police of our plans.
Get his picture! Come on! Come on! Come on! Well, I am being nice, and you're taking our pictures.
On October 31st, we were arraigned in criminal court before Judge Charles Malloy and released. Although we had been arrested together, we hardly knew each other at that time.
Robert Kilpatrick, being duly sworn, deposes and says that he works at 150 South Plymouth Avenue in the city of Rochester, county of Monroe, and state of New York. That on the 30th day of October 1977, at the city of Rochester in this county, one Sylvia Gassoy, a.k.a. Simon, Margaret M. Hall, Evelyn Walker, and one Martha Geaver wrongfully and unlawfully did commit a Class E felony, to wit, the crime of criminal mischief in the 3rd degree.
Then spray painting. Then watching her, then I think I started spray painting while she was doing the lock, although it's vague now. I did start spray painting. I was sort of nervous about that because I never spray painted before. I didn't know how it was going to come out. But then I really got into it, and I enjoyed it very much.
At about 9:30 a.m., he did observe the above-named defendants breaking a window of the premises known as the Holiday Cine Theater, located at 120 East Main Street in the city of Rochester, New York. The deponent did also observe the said defendants remove a large poster thereat, tearing same up.
She was checking up another hallway, and I sort of said, should I do it now? And she's saying, go on, get it done with. And I don't want to. So I turned around and I hit the window with a hammer, and it bounced right off. And I remember just thinking, oh my God, after all this, it's not going to work. I'm not going to be able to break it. And I looked at her, and I started to say something, and then I didn't. I just remembered why I was there, and I looked at the poster, and I just got furious, and I gripped the hammer up close to the head, which is how I cut my finger, and just smashed it very carefully, 5 smashes. And by then, I was getting a little out of control.
The opponent did catch up with the defendant.
Okay. And watching all of it is, it's so interesting and amazing. And they go to the courtroom, and their lawyer is talking to Martha, and all their friends are talking about their opinions about what happens. But Catherine, Sylvia, we'd love to hear from you and your thoughts.
One of the really wonderful things about this movie are the interviews with the women who were arrested, and some of their motivations and what it was like, what their lives were like, what violence they faced, and how movies like this that were suddenly given permission, as Elizabeth says, to be shown everywhere, impacted them. So seeing them were particularly powerful as they faced off this incredible violence. And the description and whether it was real or not gets caught up in a debate, but the point is it's such a vile presentation of how women can be treated in the name of entertainment that whether it actually happened or not is moot in light of the celebration of it happening all over, all the time, and infecting popular media so that women were seeing ourselves in worse and worse positions. People of color were exploited more, women of color, and it was imagery that was so debased it was hard to believe it could be happening. And we were mocked for protesting pornography as if pornography was identical to sensuality or eroticism. And so it occurs to me that now in this time of Epstein, that the things that people thought were simply representations, we now see the impact on a culture that permits that kind of imagination and so-called fictions. We see where they really went. So it's very powerful to me to see women responding appropriately and quickly.
Yes, and I think we know that things are even worse now, that the degrading of women is very prominent at this moment. I mean, it always was, but now it seems like it's allowed to be out there. So, yeah. But this whole thing is about patriarchy, right? I was reluctant to use that word for years because it was overused. But now, thinking about what we did then and what has come about, I think of patriarchy as a system that is enveloped in everything, in racism, in sexism, in everything. It keeps men down as well. However, men, what do men do when they're kept down? Which is most men in the world. What do? They beat up their women. And I mean, it's horrifying to think of how women are treated. So I wrote down a few things that we spoke about when we were part of RAVWA. And in addition to, of course, violence against women, the obvious violence, we also spoke about those things that aren't talked about that often, which are sterilization of women. For instance, Puerto Rican women, indigenous women, Mexican, so many women in the world. And so that was something that we pursued. Also, what is it, FGM, which is difficult because it's cultural. But I remember that we did go to talks and talk about it also. FGM is female genital mutilation, and it's very present these days also. Of course, we spoke about militarism, which it really does destroy everything because weaponry is very toxic. And people who are, especially people who are impoverished, and a lot of women are, that they are the victims of it. They can't help it, but there it is. For instance, Cancer Alley. You probably all know about it in Louisiana and Texas. Anyway, you want to say some more? Okay.
I think it might be useful to talk a bit about some of the things that we did, some of the tactics and how we dealt with the community. We spoke about doing presentations. Martha and Nancy put together, I think it was Martha's thesis, a slideshow that showed fashion magazines and popular culture, women in positions and featured and speaking of themselves in a way that was training grounds for pornography. And it was a really fabulous slideshow. We couldn't find a copy of it to show you today, but juxtaposing those two things meant that the clarity of a woman draped over a table or falling off a chair as an ad for perfume went in a perfect correspondence to a woman draped over a chair after a rape in pornography. So seeing these relationships created a really interesting dialogue that we took to universities and to organizations and instigated really interesting conversations. One of the ones that was most moving to me was a couple of us did a presentation by request from a woman at Yale Law School. She asked us to come speak to her class about to show this slideshow and discuss the legalities and so on of pornography and also of abuse of women. So we gave our presentation. It was really kind of quiet but attentive audience. And when we were done, there was some conversation. It was all men except the one woman who invited us. So when she asked a couple of questions at the end, and the response was engaged, not enthusiastic, but tolerant and a little better. One man stood up, straightened up his shirt, and he said, "Ladies, we see this and it's interesting, and there are things about it that I'm listening to, but," he said, "I want to tell you something. See this room? We own this room. We are the powerful, we're the wealthy. Our parents and our history give us power. We see this, we don't care. We own all of it." And that kind of jolt was a perfect definition of the problem at hand. When you give one class of people all the power and all the control, they're not about to give it up. So, one kind of presentation. Another time we were at Brockport and had a large audience of people who participated, and that one was the flip side. There were a couple of little kids who were allowed to see the show. Their parents felt like they wanted their girls to see it, and they stood up and spoke, and it was really very moving to see women being empowered at early age to speak out against this very thing that the man had spoken to. When we went to RIT, there had been a series of rapes on campus that were particularly brutal, and the woman who was last raped, who finally got a complaint in to the school, was convinced by the school not to bring charges because the young man was very young and he had such a career ahead. And what was unspoken was that his father provided a lot of money to the school. So when she came back from medical care after being raped, he was in class with her. He sat right near her in class. So this sort of thing inspired her to make demands of the school, so they held a conference, an open discussion, and at that, when she began to speak, she demanded the microphone. It was all to placate the upset women, and nobody was really speaking to the real issue. It was all excuses and so on. And when she demanded the microphone and began to speak, the person assigned to moderate that discussion, a woman, grabbed the microphone from her and didn't let her speak to the group. So we had a couple things planned. So, you want to talk about them? So on the screen, you see RIT, that poster. We knew that this wasn't going to go well, this conference, so we prepared a poster. It seems quite primitive, but in its day, that was a pretty good poster and looked official. And where they had announced at RIT that women were not to be alone on the campus after 10 o'clock. Can you imagine you're trying to study, you're meeting with your friends and so on. You can't be seen alone on campus without a man. No information about who was doing the raping, just you had to be with a man. We flipped it. So we put a formal announcement that men had to be accompanied by, I think it says 2 women, and we applied it to faculty, staff, and students. Well, it caused quite a bit of uproar, as you can imagine, and made the front page of the local newspaper. And there were some kind of fun details. The number that's given there was to the spay and neuter clinic of what's now Verona. So we tried to introduce a little attention-getting in our work there. So, do you want to say anything about
who we were? I didn't hear you say that. Oh, well, we were laughing so hard when we got outside, and the security stopped us. And I had been saying my name. Students asked me, what's your name? I kept saying Esther for some reason. And when we got outside, and the security person asked my name, I said Esther, and Catherine said, Ruthie.
If you know the Bible.
Ruthie, and of course I lost it. I laughed so hard. Anyway, I wanted, in conjunction with what Catherine just said about the advertisements, I wanted to say that, all of those ads, Black Velvet, all of them, which some of the women in our group threw eggs at. The women who had a good arm were able to do that. I couldn't. Yes. Yeah.
And then you put in the paint for that.
Yes.
And then, or the garden spray. Oh, sorry to interrupt, Sylvia. So the eggs with color. Then the garden sprayer is a very nice way of spraying, very high and a nice arcing spew of spray. So there were several ways of decorating the city, the artwork that needed some adjustment.
Yeah. So some of our feminists had strong arms. I wasn't one of them, but I tried to throw something and it went in the gutter. So I wanted to say, though, that those ads, they speak to right straight out capitalism. Buying and selling and buying. That's what it's about. That's another thing that feminism and patriarchy are part of the system, are systemic. And I forgot everything I wanted to say. I was reading last night about the trafficking. That is huge, huge. 50,000 girls, women and girls, come into this country every year from all over the world. But of course they go to other places also, but that is the number I read last night. That's horrible. Why? And they are girls and women who are poor. They can be bought, or, well, they're not bought, they're taken. They're sold. So, ¿qué más?
And I'll add that this is on. The sort of the protests in Rochester against billboards like this, right, were also connected to a sort of a broader campaign of women against violence against women nationally, particularly on the West Coast, directed at record labels, particularly I think it was Warner Music, right? Yeah. Where Women Against Violence Against Women in the West Coast went through a bunch of Los Angeles record stores and made an entire list of all of the record covers that they found that equated sexuality with violence against women. And they had a years-long campaign to try to get Warner Music to change these covers and pull these covers from record stores. They were not successful with the Black and Blue billboard, but it got Mick Jagger's attention at one point, and he told, I think, Rolling Stone magazine that nobody has done more for women's liberation than the Rolling Stones had, which is a take.
Okay, yes, I have something that I read in one of the many books I was reading, and can't remember what to say from them, but here's something I thought was interesting. And it's probably the best book anybody can read on this subject, which is Against Our Will by Susan Brownmiller. And in it, you can read about our American boys in Vietnam. That's their major one of their major activities was raping and murdering. So one of the things she writes about, and I didn't check it out yet, but that the Viet Cong had a very strong edict against rape and taking things. What's the word that I want for taking? Looting. So that's interesting. I mean, it's not like they didn't murder people who they thought were traitors. They used brutal methods. However, I think it's interesting that they did not. That was absolutely against their law. You don't do that. So, anyway, yeah.
Sylvia, could we ask, we were wondering if you could say a little bit more about your involvement as one of the 4 Bravo activists that were arrested and the break-in of the movie theater and the trial that ensued. So we shared a clip earlier of these events, and Sylvia was one of the 4 women directly involved.
Well, I didn't have to think a lot about it because even my 9-year-old daughter said that has to go, pointed to the poster, because, saying could only be made in South America, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I was involved in the anti-war movement for a long time, so I know that phrase. That's always obtained in wars. I don't know what to say about being arrested. I was a little nervous about it, only because I'm what's the word? When you don't want to be enclosed somewhere. Claustrophobic. I don't know what to say about being locked up. I mean, why? Well, I think all of us who were there knew why we were there. I mean, had to do that. You can't just walk by that and leave. You have to do something. And then it was exciting to hear all the women in the court, in the outside the courtroom, talking. So, I don't. What do you want to know? No, I don't know what one could. I mean, it was exciting to be on the line initially, And then, well, a cute story that isn't about patriarchy so much. It was October 30th, and my daughter wanted to know if she could still do Halloween.
So you guys broke into the Holiday Sin Theater, which
Yes.
was I believe it was connected to a Holiday Inn, and you tore down the posters for the film Snuff.
Yes. Yeah.
What were the charges that were leveled against you?
It began as a felony.
It was a felony
Initially.
And
yeah.
what was the outcome?
I'm not sure. I mean, I was excused because I had children, and I think at that time I was in nursing school. So I wasn't supposed to pay the $100. But we knew we wouldn't pay it anyway, so we wouldn't do that.
Yeah. I think you all were ordered to pay like some sort of like $1,000 restitution to the Holiday Sin owner.
Yeah.
And I don't think I have not found any evidence that you all actually paid that.
It was just for 100 after it went from.
Yeah, right.
Yes, it went from thousands of dollars after all of the court brouhaha. The judge dismissed himself, recused himself, and so it was months again before the trial. And by then, people were bored in the courts, and they dropped it to a $100 charge, and no one paid it. Can I? I was going to speak to something else.
Well, you're reminding me of Karen was very much present. The strategizing at a friend's living room. It was wonderful. It was wonderful ideas and funny. But you weren't there. No, it was funny.
Something else.
It wasn't her living room. It was Laura Carstenson's living room.
And you guys each read a statement in court, right? And then you all said something in unison, right? I don't remember what it was.
I don't have it.
Do we have that?
What they said in court.
What they said in court. Their statements.
I don't know. I don't think that I saw that in the archive, but
I didn't bring it. It was great.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. Their statements were awesome. Yeah.
What? Oh, yeah. Okay.
I'm going to expand this. Does this microphone work? It doesn't.
Yes.
Okay. A little bit to other kinds of things we did that I think are important, and the context for that was that women really had no protection. To report a rape was to whistle in the wind. There was no help at all. There wasn't a lot of medical help, and there was no help from the police. And so what we found was it was important to give a voice to women. The rapists weren't arrested. So one of the things we did was put up posters with the rapist's name on it in their neighborhood. We tweet paste the poster so it was hard to remove, and a man would have to face his picture and an accusation when he went out into the neighborhood. And that was a powerful thing to do and felt like support for the community. Sometimes it took a more entertaining twist. There was a rapist who owned an ice cream shop, and people printed up labels that said this ice cream was made by a rapist, and secretly put it on all his products, all over his store. So it hampered his business a little bit for a while. And there were lots of activities that involved bringing attention to things rather than destroying. And one of the more entertaining was there was a particularly gruesome cover on a Hustler magazine, you saw it here, with a woman being fed into a meat grinder. And when that came out, Bravo women, some of them took Ipecac, which causes vomiting, went into the porn store and began to pick up the magazine and caused quite a ruckus. And so there were very catchy ways of approaching this thing that were great. So humor was, as you discussed, a way to draw attention to things where pure rage, we use the expression, turn rage into action, but we also turned it into accessibility, making something available for people to see, with not just anger and chanting and so on, but combining different tactics. Want to add to that?
I might jump in quickly and say we should open it up for Q&A very soon. I'm wondering, before we open it up to Q&A, if Sylvia and Catherine, you can talk briefly about your activism today, moving after Ravwa, how you see Ravwa within your longer trajectory of activism. Yeah.
I wanted to say that after Ravwa more or less ended, I don't remember that exactly how that came about, but a few of us, very few, and then a lot of other women morphed into a different group, which was called RWAP, Rochester Women's Action for Peace. And that, I think, was a very important organization also. That is the one some of you may have heard of at Seneca Army Depot. And that's where we did a lot of action. Some of us stayed out there, not me, but some of us lived there. Some created a whole plumbing system. It was a marvelous thing, and it was like the women at Greenham Common, which some of you may know, and Cosimo, which was in Italy. So there were women all over that, I mean, I don't know about other countries, other areas, but all over here and in Europe that were responding to the military. And the military, that's it, as far as I'm concerned. They're the worst. I mean, I mean the people who create wars. And they've always have. I know that. I know that that's been going on forever. So, yeah. Okay, I think. What are we doing now? We do the same thing. I'm very involved in. We're very involved in anti-war in Palestine. So that's the big thing. Of course, the war everywhere, Lebanon, Iran, and everywhere. Yeah. So, but that's where the main action is.
My experience with Ravwa and coming to attention the structures of power. Sylvia, by the way, has always taught me everything is everything, and you can see that in her presentation. I wound up working with helping to found a group called Enough is Enough, and we have dealt with people who have struggled with police violence, who've been abused by RPD. It's a local group that we lasted about 7 years before there was attrition by youthful moving away. But worked on that, and also saw that that kind of social violence was responsible for the impoverishment of people in certain neighborhoods in our region, and was part of a group called Take Back the Land, where we did some pretty interesting things. People would be tossed out of their homes by really rotten banks who were stealing directly from people who had housing but not much else in the way of resources. And they'd be thrown out, evicted from their homes, and we'd move them back in, go pick up their stuff, put that back in, get a plumber, get an electrician, and what do you know, they were back home, and it would take another 6 months for the courts to evict them again. And so there's been a lot of related activity, things that connect, that I've followed through on. So that brought me, when the genocide in Palestine began, brought me to resistance and to work there. A couple of my friends in that group just walked in the door. They're back from demonstrating on our behalf. Follow the hat. In every possible way, follow the hat. So, and there's a sign in the back that held up saying "No War." That must be related. So, Sylvia, see, everything is everything. So, those are the things that I stay connected to now.
Amazing. I think that's a great segue to opening it up to you all for a Q&A. So we will be bringing a microphone from stage. If you want to raise your hand and ask a question, we have about 15-20 minutes for Q&A before we take a break, and our keynote speaker, Stanley Martin, will be joining us on stage and be talking about her work in Rochester today and connecting it to Sylvia and Catherine's decades-long work in Rochester. So, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, thank you all so much on the panel. This has been so amazing. I had a question for Sylvia. Sylvia, you had said as part of your story that when you first moved to Rochester, you were a single mom. And I'm just wondering, like, what was your children's experience of this? How did you involve them in activism? And who did they grow to be through your very in-your-face activism?
Thank you. Let's see. Well, okay. I came in '76. Their father just left, had decided he wanted to not have that responsibility anymore. It's not, he was an artist, so that's it. And they were not I think 9 and maybe 13 or 14. The boy, a girl and a boy, and the girl was 9. And well, she's become kind of an activist. I mean, I took her to not all the meetings, but a lot of meetings. So she remembers that. As for him, he knows it all. He knows all of that. And he talks about it at times with me. But he went through the drug time. So, but now he's getting on. Both of them are. So, but she, yes, she doesn't miss, I have to say, she doesn't like me to use the word patriarch. She's sick of it and she doesn't want to hear it. But now I'm going to talk with her more because now I have a different, a bigger look at it. But yeah, recently not everything is patriarchal. So, does that answer?
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the question. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. I was just wondering, at the time that you were doing this work, what other groups in Rochester either did you get support from, or were you specifically, was there anyone who was really pushing back and not supporting you? I'm just curious overall with the other climate of other groups in town, how that looked.
There was a fine feminist newspaper at the time, the New Women's Times, and the founder and editor is sitting right there, Karen Hagberg, who documented what we did and expanded many topics affecting women at the time. It was a really good local newspaper that got national attention. And there were other groups that represented different aspects of the activist community. There were, within that period of time, there was a storefront that had anti-war materials that were available, and they had some relationship with us. And there were other activist groups that came out of the Black community where we had dialogue with. It was not always easy to combine viewpoints. It's much clearer now that, as Sylvia says, everything is everything. It's much clearer as we have more media and more capacity to speak to one another and to understand, and not isolated groups. So I think that there are many more coalitions now than there were in those days.
Well, hi, I'm Karen Hagberg, who they just referred to. These women were incredibly courageous and adventurous with their activism, and I was kind of on the fringe of their activism. I was the one with the strong arm with the eggs. But I was publishing the New Women's Times at the time and documenting everything that they did and editorializing about it. And I wanted to bring up what I see. Well, first of all, I've always been incredibly aware of sexual politics from the time I was very, very young. And I loved editorializing about it in the New Women's Times. And even to this day, I spend a lot of time on the internet correcting people about their ideas about what's going on today. And something I think really, really needs to be addressed is the war on transgender women today. And we need to ask ourselves, why is it the war on transgender women and not on transgender men? It's a really good question to start with. There's actually a genocide going on against transgender women. And it's like when you have a situation where there's an abuser and a victim, a very common tactic of the abuser is to accuse the victim of exactly what they're doing. I'm sure many of you are totally aware of that. So, everything that's hurled toward transgender women today is exactly what they are doing. Who attacks women in restrooms? Has anyone ever heard of a transgender woman doing it? They turn transgender women into the abuser in the mind of too many people in our country. So that's all. I just wanted to bring that into the foreground because sexual politics, I think you've pointed out, things have become very overt, and the kinds of things that people are able to say. It's just horrendous, actually. So I just keep screaming on the internet for what it's worth, and we don't publish the paper anymore, but the internet gets out there. So yeah, express yourselves on the internet every chance you get.
I was feeling isolated when I first moved to Rochester, and the community I found at New Women's Times was very important, and I had the opportunity to publish my first pieces there. But what I want to just underscore is how important it has been in my life, and probably many, many other lives, to experience women teaching other women. And we had what was called women's consciousness raising groups. Raise your hands if you were in one. And it was a process of learning and unlearning and sorting out what held up and what didn't. And I think it was long before women's studies was an academic field. This was a pioneering force in feminism.
Thank you so much. This was an amazing panel, and the history is so fascinating. My question's about how much you see this dynamic between sexualization of women in media and violence against women in media playing out today in contemporary culture and in contemporary media. Is there still this sort of equation between sexualization and violence against women? I mean, I'm thinking, for instance, of like social media, in particular, the manosphere, people like Andrew Tate. Anyway, I just would love to hear reactions from the panel. Thank you so much.
For a little while, it seemed to me as though the manosphere you described was a sort of isolated and disdained sect, but it began to get freer and freer, and now is sort of at the center of much of what you see on the internet, and now the controls are in the hands of men who believe these atrocities. So it's really alarming how speedily it went from seeing a sect of really disenfranchised men who felt their lives were controlled by women, and who we referred to them as basement men or mama's boys and so on. And then so this small group of people has now taken over our entire country and all of our technology. So it's very frightening, because at the core of it is this constant debasement of women. The language, women in their lives aren't supposed to do the very things that we freed women from, and I say we freed, it was a period of time in which women my age were coming from not being able to own a house or a checkbook or able to choose. The example that always springs to my mind is a high school friend who was really brilliant mathematician who was not allowed to take the placement test that would have given her a scholarship. There were occasional women who broke through those boundaries, but they were very profound. And from that core, we made so much change over the years. And now we see it diminished in women's bodies and reproductive health, reproductive rights, and in every other aspect of women's lives. There's some banks that no longer will serve women. There are people who can't get what we know, adequate medical care and so on. So all of that is related to the increase in violent representations and so on. So I see it as a swing back from accomplishments we made to devastating ruin caused by the distinctions you're pointing out.
And okay, I'll just very quickly say that, it's important to think about women all over the world, because we frequently just think of over here, but women are treated horribly, really horribly in other countries, and especially now with money unavailable.
Okay.
The health of black women, the health situation is much worse than white women in this country.
Okay, the question I'd like to ask, since you ladies were activists in a different time zone, as well as many of us today, how do you feel with the change of the climate of the female being exploited beyond your wildest imagination, even though she was doing this during the 70s? Do you see what the women are going through today as worse now than it was ever before because of what they're doing to their bodies and how they're representing the female in the media? Do you think that need to be changed dramatically so we could get back to what once was? I did not mean to be God.
No, it's on a continuum, and that continuum isn't angular. It's a roller coaster. So many things change, and many worsen, and some improve. So I don't feel the restrictions as an old woman that I did as a young woman. I have more freedoms in some ways than I did previously. On the other hand, I see young women altering their bodies in extreme ways and being forced into ways of thinking about themselves that are echoes of things that I recall from my youth. So in terms of media representation, I think we accept. I don't think I can answer that.
I think I can.
I think you have something in mind.
I think I could, even though I'm not a female.
Would you like to say what you have in mind?
Yeah, what I think we need to really do, and combining two different generations together is one, because I'm more or less worried about my great-grandchildren than I am about my daughters, because they very well trained through me. It's my great-grandchildren I worry about the most, because they're easy to be influenced now than ever before. And I believe we need to get more activists now if we want to have a better nation and a better world. Because like you said earlier, if we keep going to sleep, one morning they're going to wake up and it's going to be out of the Pandora box. And I have no business answering this question myself. Here you go.
I hear your direction.
And I enjoyed myself.
And it does make sense. They're exposed to so much more than we ever dreamed of. Some days I'm very addicted to media. And there are some days that the combination of the requirements of ordinary life and the people I know close at hand, and then the constant expansion of media influence is very hard to handle. And I think of young children and grandkids' age and what they face. So
This will be the last comment before our break.
To your point, very good point. I basically my activism comes from the LGBTQ movement more than anti-war, more than pure feminism. And I did a lot of public speaking really early on in the gay movement. And people would ask me, what was it like to grow up gay in the 50s? You know, and I would say, well, we never heard the word gay, we never heard the word lesbian, or we didn't know who we were even, and it was, you know, we had to figure out who we were, and it was terrible because there was nobody like us, and we were the only ones in the world. And okay, fast forward, now when somebody asked me the question, what was it like to grow up in the 50s compared to now, which is pertinent to your question. Now, gay people, especially transgender people, are subject to just hate all over the place. It's all out there. It's, you know, it's like we know who we are now, and we know we're targets. And it's in a way, I wouldn't want to be young right now. You know, my youth was hard enough, but this is really bad. I mean, it's so hateful and it's so out there. And I think that goes with every feminist issue and war issue, anti-war issue. It's just all out there. You know, we have a president who just goes and shoots up people for the fun of it, you know. It's incredible. So to me, it's just come, what was undercover decades ago is like out there now. Yeah.
We're going to take a 15-minute break, and we will reconvene at 3 for Councilmember Stanley Martin. Thank you, everyone. our keynote speaker, Councilmember Stanley Martin. Stanley is an abolitionist who serves the community with courage, love, and integrity. In her career, Stanley has worked as a mental health counselor for incarcerated people and has led a substance abuse recovery center. She co-founded Free the People Rochester, which is an organization dedicated to implementing a care-based vision of community safety. As an at-large city council member, Stanley engages in collaborative governance with the community. She currently leads the New York State Daniels Law Coalition and works to implement a peer-led public health response to people in crisis across the state. Without further ado, let's invite Stanley Martin to the podium.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you to Shoulders to Stand On for having me. Thank you to the library, all the library staff who does great work. One of my favorite spaces in the city is the Central Library, so I'm very grateful to be here today. So I want to start by, of course, thanking the Rochester Women Against Violence Against Women. Let's give them a round of applause. It is so essential to have access to our history. It is so essential to have women in leadership, and it is so important to hear the stories of resilience and resistance that these women faced. One of the big things my family has always taught me is the principle of Sankofa, which means go back and get it. It means learn from the past. It means that there are lessons and wisdom that we can always look back to and help predict and help us in the future. So a lot of what I'm gonna be talking about today is about my history, where I come from, whose shoulders I stand on, the lessons I've learned in the movement and how it connects to the work of the Rochester Women Against Violence Against Women and the path forward. I will say I do get nervous speaking in public, so excuse me if I stutter. Excuse the PowerPoint also. I'm not as talented as the folks who came before me, but you know, I tried. I did my little thing. So I'm from Ghana originally, and this is a picture of my grandmother, Eva. She grew up in Elmina, and some of you may know about Elmina Castle, which is one of the locations of the West African slave trade. Right within her village, that was one of the last points where people who were kidnapped, stolen, traded, ever got to sea before they were sent to America, Europe, everywhere else. So growing up with that history, I think understanding the concept of resistance, understanding fascism, understanding capitalism was something I knew innately without even having the language for. This is why we're cautious around certain things. This is why we value our people over money. And she is the matriarch of our family and deeply responsible for who I am today. My mother, one of my favorite people in the world, I truly stand on her shoulders, also grew up in Ghana, Elmina, and she is a revolutionary in every sense of the word. When I think about what it means to be a femme or a woman, I think about the boundaries of womanhood that she expanded just with fighting for our rights, fighting to ensure that growing up as a child, the opportunities that were afforded to my brothers and other boys around us were also afforded to me, ensuring that I could play sports, ensuring that I knew how to defend myself both physically and verbally, and just really someone whose shoulders I stand on, someone who empowers me. Thinking about where my family is from, one of the biggest lessons we learned was about relying on each other. Again, my grandmother, my mother grew up here in Elmina. They understood what slavery meant. They understood whose families people were stolen from. They could identify those connections. They could identify what it meant to lose someone forever, to see someone once and be taken away for the sake of capital, for the sake of money. So those lessons were really ingrained into me. And this is a picture I took when, on the right, the other one is just from the internet, but on the right, I visited Elmina Castle with my mother in 2023. Since moving to America, we actually had not been able to afford to go back. It's really expensive, and we were finally able to go back, and it was a transformative experience, you know, going to see my grandmother's grave, being in the castle with my mother, really grounding myself in why I'm here and the reasons I fight. So this is in Elmina Castle for anyone who comes to visit. Of the anguish of our ancestors, may those who died rest in peace. May those who return find their roots. May humanity never again perpetuate such injustice against humanity. We, the living, vow to uphold this. This is where I come from, and when I fight for anyone across race, class, gender, it's just grounded in a deep value for all humanity. Every breathing, living thing deserves to live with dignity, care, and being raised by a family whose family members were stolen from Ghana and brought here. It always grounds me in the work I do. So transitioning from my family, a little bit more about me. I did grow up in Ghana also. It was a very homogenous society. I was into any and everything. You know, I thought I wanted to be a singer. I thought I wanted to be a brain surgeon. I wanted to be a lawyer. I just wanted to do it all, and I didn't understand the concept of time. So if I'm late, it's always been that way. But I think about these times, and the first time I even recognized the concept of racism was when I moved from Ghana to America. I moved close to the age of going into high school. I remember living in a poor, low-income neighborhood. Our homes were heavily surveilled. It was mainly single mothers, just like my mother, and we were always threatened by police. My friends and I were constantly stopped. And when I'd visit friends in other neighborhoods, I realized that they were treated differently. And I was with my friends who were white. I also didn't have those same experiences. So I would say in high school, I started to develop that consciousness. Like, what's going on? Why am I experiencing these things? What's so different about me? But those lived experiences really broadened my analysis of race. And what it meant to have black skin and live in a black body in America. Following high school, I moved here. Following high school, I went to undergrad, similar experiences around race, primarily around gender. I remember taking my first women's studies class in undergrad, really connecting my analysis of race with gender. Partially because of how I was raised, I never really understood, right? I understood the race part later on, right? But the intersection of race and gender really happened for me in college. Following undergrad, I moved to Rochester. I came here to study mental health counseling at the University of Rochester. And a lot of you know Emily Good. She was one of the first friends I made here in Rochester. So imagine, right? I just show up here, hate all my classes. I'm like, okay, where's the analysis of capitalism? Where's the analysis of race when it comes to therapy? Where's the analysis around capitalism, queer identity? And Emily Good would always speak up in class and say, well, how about capitalism? How about race? So we quickly became friends, and shortly thereafter, she brought me to one of my favorite places in the city, the Flying Squirrel. I think the first time I was there might have been a prison letter writing party, and I felt so honored to meet people who cared so much about incarcerated people. I grew up with my brother being incarcerated for 12 years. He was very young, barely over 18 when he was incarcerated. I saw what it did to him, but it was pretty taboo to talk about it. It was just something we put to the side. Yeah, he's gone away, but I knew and understood what that meant. I didn't have a chance to talk about it with people until I really came into the Rochester space, started talking to people about prison abolition. I understood the theories, but I didn't have the language. And I think my experience with Rochester, the Flying Squirrel, really gave me the language. Emily Good followed her to visit Attica Prison, right? So still learning about prison, abolition, race, gender. This was my first visit to a prison. We went to Attica to visit Jalil Muntakim, who's now been released. He was one of the longest held political prisoners in the world, actually. And he was finally released after nearly 50 years. I think he went in when he was around 19 years old. So his story and how young he was when he was incarcerated really resonated with me. And one of the most important things about my growth and development into an activist is really the women who took me under their wing. Emily Good started. I later met Dawn Zuppelli. Many of you know Mary Adams. I met Ashley Gant. Just Rochester women who would not take no for an answer. They will fight, they will resist, they will be creative, they'll find a way. But on my journey into activism, these are some of the women who really shaped my analysis. And the way they brought me in also shapes how I approach newer activists and organizers, and that openness and just never knowing what people may need and how we can move forward together. So, Rochester activism. Following grad school, I learned about police accountability in Rochester. Some of you may see Catherine Dennison over there. Of course, she was involved. But we met actually at a witchy bar on State Street. And I got involved with Enough is Enough, got involved with the Police Accountability Board. And again, the people I would lean towards were women who were just so open, who would share. I believe Catherine was talked to me about animal rights and what was going on in parts of Africa with animals, and just the openness, the willingness to just say, hey, I don't know you, but I'm gonna share some knowledge. I'm gonna talk to you about something that's important to me, and I'm gonna bring you in. And that consistent thread has kept me within the activist space and the activist movement. So in thinking about the fight for police accountability in Rochester, some of the tactics we used are very similar to what Catherine and Sylvia talked about. Our analysis in general, first of all, around organizing and activism has always been intersectional. We've always had a critique of patriarchy, critique of capitalism, making sure that our fight includes our trans and LGBTQ+ siblings. Essentially, wherever there is an injustice, we believe as activists it is our duty to step in, support, and fight. We may not have all the answers, but you know right and wrong, and when something is wrong, as an activist, you have to step in and fight. So I want to talk about some of the differences or the expansion of where we are from the period with Rava and now. Some of the disparities we see, I would say, are probably similar to what was going on 50 years ago. One of the big things I want to point out is around child health and well-being. And when we think about women, especially Black Latino mothers, the outcomes regarding their births are significantly different from what happens with their white counterparts. We also know that we are still struggling with economic outcomes for Black folks as compared to white folks. And these fights have existed for decades. And unfortunately, though there may be some differences, at the core of it, there is deep racial disparity, gender disparity, and all in all, systemic violence grounded in a patriarchal analysis, an analysis grounded in capitalism. So we see that across so many different sectors. And this is from the ACT Rochester 2025 report. I want to talk a bit about some of the wins we've had through activism and organizing. Catherine talked a bit about Take Back the Land, the organization that would fight to put folks back in their homes and recognize that housing is a human right, and forget an eviction, we're coming back, that is our land. That group morphed into the Rochester Citywide Tenants Union, and they were responsible for winning good cause eviction. We were one of the largest cities outside of New York City, of course, who won good cause eviction, and that leadership came from folks like Catherine, Liz McGriff, who was one of the people who fought to keep her house, fought foreclosure, another strong woman. So when I think about the wins and where we've come, I see a lot of interconnections between movements started back then and folks now just carrying it on with similar principles. Thinking about the win for good cause, similar tactics. We made very cute, cheeky flyers. We included humors. There was a key campaign where if you found the key, you return it to City Council and let them know housing is a human right. How would it feel to not have a key to your house? So using a lot of creativity, bringing people in, and also talking to folks in the community, right? To win good cause, it didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened because there was conversation here locally, conversation in the States, and like Sylvia mentioned, always being in conversation, not only locally, but thinking about what is happening statewide, nationally, globally. Another thing I'd point out when it comes to evictions is that one of the primary groups affected by evictions are women, and specifically women with children. In eviction court, you'll see a lot of women who are being evicted, displaced. So this is another issue I see carrying on from the 50s that continues to affect women. But this is a win, and a lot of the time we talk about the struggles, but I also think it's important to talk about what we won so we know that the fights we are fighting are possible to win, right? We're not just doing it because it's a good idea. We're doing it because we want to win, and it is our duty to win. So when we build and we organize, it's important to highlight some of these wins. Another big win that was truly led by women, queer folks, trans folks, just a broad sector of marginalized people who recognize that in order to have an analysis grounded in humanity and care, we have to also have a strong critique of imperialism. So for us in Rochester, what that meant was announcing, ensuring that we had a resolution, calling for a ceasefire, fighting to preserve human life. And this happened, again, not because anyone was nice or felt so bad. It happened because people demanded that it happened. People literally occupied City Hall. People were asked to leave and they said no. People came in, they informed their families. I believe people were even fasting this day. People came in, they broke their fast in City Hall with dates, and they were ready to be arrested for this cause. So I think about Sylvia and Catherine and what they were willing to give up. And with organizing, with fighting, with radical activism, you have to be willing to give up something. And it's not always being arrested. Sometimes it's giving up a Sunday evening with your cat, your dogs, or bringing them along, you know. Bring them all, right? Sometimes it's staying up a little later than you would like to. Sometimes I stay up till midnight. I try to go to bed at 9. I fail every day. But, you know, I will keep trying. So just being willing to think about what am I willing to sacrifice and whatever is comfortable for you or sometimes uncomfortable. But again, nothing happens without people organizing and fighting. So one big connection that I saw in watching the video till now is policing, right? You see how police treated the folks they arrested when they were outside the holiday cinema. And we see those trends in policing continue, right? Policing is very deeply grounded in a patriarchal analysis. It's very deeply grounded in capitalism. The goal is primarily to protect capital, property, not necessarily people. So many of you know in 2020, right here in Rochester, Daniel Prude was killed by RPD while he was experiencing a mental health crisis. This week actually is the 6-year anniversary of his killing. And folks stood up, folks fought for change, folks continue to fight for change. But in organizing around the killing of Daniel Prude and George Floyd at that time, I was lucky to have women in my life who joined me in founding Free the People Rochester. Our analysis really was grounded in addressing all the harms that impacted community safety, our analysis of safety is grounded in healthy food, housing, access to childcare, all the things that keep folks whole and allow them to thrive versus force and brutality. So within that framework, myself, Ashley Gant, Iman Abid, and Stevie Vargas were the 4 folks who came together. We didn't know in May 2020 that what ended up happening would be Free the People Rochester and still being in existence 5 years later. We just knew that what happened to George Floyd was not okay. We knew that we couldn't possibly be the only ones feeling that way. It was during COVID. And we decided to get out into our community, talk to people, post flyers, let people know we're doing a march. And that ended up being one of the largest marches in the history of Rochester since the '64 uprising. And within that framework, with thousands of people in the street, people working on policy, people again occupying City Hall, I was one of the folks who were beaten and arrested. We ended up being able to change some of the protest laws around how RPD responds when people want to organize and speak up. This was a hard fight, but it really ensures that when people go out and speak up, they are not risking literally dying, right? We know people lost eyes out there. We know people had concussions. People were physically harmed. And some of these changes, we know canine dogs were out there. Just an extremely brutal point in our city. And when I think of that time and the role of women, I really remember myself and other women being so scared of what police would do to Black men and men of color at that point. So along with elders, people who felt that they were maybe less at risk, put their bodies on the line, stood on the front lines, and really led those marches knowing that whatever we may have to lose, it may not be as bad for someone else. And I see my friend Nona just walked in, and I just want to acknowledge Nona. I met her in the streets in 2020. I might cry, oh my goodness. She really took me in. She would always ask, have you had food? Have you eaten? Made sure everyone was fed. And when I think of feminism and organizing and just keeping on, the people who have really been instrumental in my development and my safety have always been women. I don't know why you took me in. I don't know what you saw in me. I don't know how you're even here today on this day. She doesn't even live here anymore. But yeah, women have always held it down for me and for all of us in this community. One other win, so this is the expansion of Free the People. We held our first abolitionist conference. Similar to what Catherine and Sylvia talked about, we recognize that it's important to educate, learn, raise folks' consciousness. So we decided to host a conference about what's happening around ICE as it relates to policing, what's happening around policing in general, and really get folks who are curious, who want to do more, and just work together to raise each other's consciousness. One thing I really love about my organization, Free the People Rock, is that it is entirely led by women and femmes. That was not on purpose, it's just how we gravitated towards each other, how we felt safe. And in the back, you see Liz McGriff, who was instrumental in the Take Back the Land work and the citywide tenants union currently. So again, similar tactics, really getting out there, talking to people who may have any level of curiosity, inviting people to learn, offering food, planning. A lot of planning and building coalition is essential. Other things that we've worked on. So I am one of the members of the Daniel's Law Coalition. I currently lead the statewide coalition working around mental health. We came about in 2021 following the murder of Daniel Prude. And the goal really was to entirely remove police as the default response to mental health crises. We know that when folks have mental health crises, if pretty much anyone but someone with a badge and a gun shows up, they're likely to recover and get the help they need. So within that framework, and to us, it's so simple, just a trained mental health professional, a community advocate, someone with lived experience just showing up to support mental health crises. That coalition is largely led by women. Again, not intentional, but women continue to find each other, create space across the state, and we just work. We just get down to what do we need to do, who's going to do what, who's going to handle the food, because that's important. It's something I always forget, and we just keep going. Just this year, $6 million was awarded to 3 communities across New York State. Rochester was one of the communities that received $2 million to expand their mental health crisis response framework to include people with lived experience and make sure that people are getting the help they need. So these are tangible things we are doing. These are efforts led by women. These are efforts led by feminists, efforts led by people who have an analysis that is critical of the patriarchy, critical of violence against women in the various forms it shows up. I will also point out that here within the city of Rochester, there have been some women who have been killed or shot during mental health crises by the RPD. So when we think about how we keep women safe, for me it's always important to include an analysis of what role does RPD or any policing agency play in responses to women. On this note, one thing that came up in the conversation with Sylvia and Catherine was about violence against women, especially as it relates to women being raped. 50 years ago, there were less opportunities for remedy, but what we see now is even when women report violence, there are frameworks within the law that allows them to report. There are kits that can be tested to prove who the person who harmed them is. Even then, women tend to not be believed. Even then, we see backlogs with testing the rape kits. So as we change technology, change laws, in hopes of preventing violence against women, we're still seeing that these mechanisms continue to fall short. I do also want to mention the student within Eastman School of Music who reported being sexually harmed. She was kicked out of the institution and she's continuing to fight for justice. So even now, here in the city of Rochester, women are still not believed and they are still fighting to tell their stories and still fighting to remain in educational institutions when they have the courage to come forward. So shifting back to another win, right? Who here voted to create a police accountability board in the 2019 referendum? Very cool. I was knocking doors with the Police Accountability Board Alliance. I was involved in a video talking about here are the 5 pillars of police accountability, and I just believed with every fiber of my being that this was going to be different, this is the way, and I still do. But although we won then, one thing I want people to take away today is that the fight sometimes keeps going, right? Some of these wins we experience, unfortunately, are not permanent, and we see that within the Police Accountability Board. Since the 60s, and probably even earlier, community members impacted by police brutality have been organizing and fighting to hold police accountable when they cause harm. To me, this is a liberal measure, right? They are just asking, at the very minimum, please, when someone hurts me, take them off the street so they don't hurt someone else, or so they don't come back and target me and hurt me. The Locust Club, the men who fight for police unaccountability, have successfully won several lawsuits dating way back 50 years ago against transforming how policing is done. Just this week on the 23rd, I believe, or on the 20th, the Police Accountability Board was stripped of additional power. They were initially stripped of their disciplinary investigations power. Now they're stripped of their ability to investigate individual misconduct. And the question I want you all to ask yourself is, who benefits from police not being held accountable? It is not us. It's not the day-to-day folks. It's not our neighbors. It's none of us. And in fact, it's not even the institution of policing. So this is a fight that I want to draw folks' attention to and thinking about what else can we do. For me, policing has always been a big issue because of just the disparity in power around who is policed, who has a monopoly on violence, and the outcomes for people who experience those kinds of harm. So this is a picture from when the referendum was passed. Some of you see familiar faces, of course, Catherine, boots on the ground. Where there's action, you will find Catherine, and you will find Sylvia, and you'll find many of the women who have been engaged in activism since the 50s. I want to take this opportunity in talking about what the next fight looks like, and I think it's around defending the Police Accountability Board, right? We have fought for years and years. Women have led the fight. Families impacted by police brutality have led the fight, and we're fighting against the Locust Club, a white, male-centric patriarchal organization, primarily not based even in the city of Rochester, who have done essentially everything in their power to continue to stop police from being held accountable. At the height of our successes, there was a very strong alliance that included over 50 organizations. And my ask here today is for folks to get ready to engage in the fight again. Again, no one in city council or in any state office is going to take action just because they think it feels right to do or it's the best thing to do. It happens when people demand action. It happens when we occupy spaces. It happens when we go door knocking and canvassing and educating our neighbors. So one thing I want to leave you with is a call to action. I'm asking folks to get involved in the fight to hold police accountable, follow the Police Accountability Board Alliance. I know they'll be sharing different ways people can get involved. This is a protracted struggle, but I believe we can win, and I know that because of all the other wins we've had in this community. And a lesson that I always take, again, learn from the past. This is my grandmother. When I was sworn in for my second term, I had on her cloth over my shoulder. And bringing her with me in space, it's a form of accountability for me. It reminds me of the fights she had, the fights her ancestors had, just to live, just to literally not be stolen and sent abroad into slavery. So when I bring her with me, I know that no matter what is ahead, I can rely on women, just like I have relied on women in my family, women here in Rochester, in my community. One of the greatest feminists I know is my grandmother, and I'm just excited to continue the fight. Proud to be a femme and a council member and a community organizer and activist in the same city that Sylvia and Catherine were making trouble in. And finally, so there's this trend on Instagram where people show baby pictures of themselves and they have these cute little captions. Since I'm still hip, I did the trend also. And this is me as a kid, an abolitionist, a feminist, and it is with just deep and great honor that I hope to carry the radical tradition that Sylvia, Catherine, and so many other women in this community have lit the fire in. Thank you.
All right, let's see some hands. Does anybody have questions for Stanley?
Softballs, please, softballs. It's Saturday.
Well, thank you so much, Stanley. And also, this is just not necessarily a question, but a couple of my good friends, one of them is a part of the Police Accountability Board and wish they were at the protest this morning, otherwise I would have roped them into coming here. But he was just sharing with me that after following those events, they are putting out like support for saving the Police Accountability Board and speaking up to council on April 16th, and they're going to be putting out flyers and putting that on their Instagram soon, and he just printed out like hundreds of flyers. So if there's a way I can try to distribute that to people today, maybe we could get that to everyone here. But yeah, they're already working on it.
Yes, amazing. So yes, April 16th, come speak to council. Again, power, in the words of Frederick Douglass, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. So stay tuned, come speak to council. And whenever people are assembled, it's so important that we organize. So I would love if you could share what you have, and folks who are interested, follow the Rochester Police Accountability Board and also the Rochester Police Accountability Board Alliance. Please get involved. This has been a historical fight, and the only way we win is if we're all involved. Thank you.
Hi, Stanley. Ralph Carter. I am just in awe of the work that you have done to really help Rochester move forward, in welcoming all people to Rochester, the immigration issues that you've been involved with, and on council, and it's such an inspiration. I'm so happy to be able to be here for the second half of this afternoon. But I wanted to follow up on the Police Accountability Board and the Alliance. Is there a good, for those of us who were not involved at the beginning, and I was involved, as you know, on the Alliance for a while, but I don't have a good foundation of that journey, especially the precipitating event, where the man was followed by police and was killed. And he was not at all the person that they were seeking. I mean, and I don't even know what happened to the officers at the outset, because I think that some of the extreme violence, deadly violence by Rochester Police Department, which fueled the initial fight for accountability. Some of that history we need to really know, and what has happened with those officers. Because I don't think there's been really any accountability for any of the officers that have been involved in deadly force. And there may be some, but a lot of them know. And I'm also kind of curious, and we don't need to discuss it here, maybe later, but with the change in leadership in the city government, it seems to me that part of the legal justification all has to do with the permission for the Locust Club to be heavily involved in deciding what the discipline is going to be. And that did not have to be in the contract negotiated with the police union. And so there's some of that history that I think it really has to do with leadership, in city government. And even in terms of legal counsel, it just really befuddled me how you can have the same legal counsel for the police union as you have for the staff at the Police Accountability Board. There's just a mess. But there needs to be a good critique, a concise critique, it seems to me, of the history, and then looking backward, in terms of attempts at accountability and it not happening at all. There's probably some really good nuggets there that informs why we really need accountability, because people have not been held accountable who have been deliberately involved in brutality against the citizens of Rochester. So whatever you are able to share, in a setting like this, but that history, we need to know our history, otherwise we're just doomed to repeat. But thank you for your leadership and speaking up, and I appreciate you.
Thank you, Ralph. I had a chance to organize with Ralph in the Police Accountability Board Alliance for several years. And when it comes to the issue around collective bargaining, the role of the Locust Club, there are state laws that make it difficult, and that is the basis for a lot of the court decisions that we're getting. So to me, the answer is changing state law, but also looking at how we contract with the Locust Club and seeing if there's any room for change. But this is a much longer question, and the answer is we need to all meet up outside of here, break down our history, go back, see what we can learn from the past, and really rebuild a movement like we had in 2019, 2020 around police accountability.
Stanley, when you ran for office, you ran as a Democrat, but you were also endorsed by the DSA and the Working Families Party. The Working Families Party have just endorsed Morelli, and the Democratic Party in New York State spent a lot more energy during the past election for Congress opposing progressives than Republicans, and is really responsible for the Republican majority in the House. So I wonder if you could comment on what is going on there, what kind of struggle, and where you see some hope for the progressive side, maybe making some greater progress.
Yeah, so in the US, we have this two-party system, right? Democrats, Republicans, sometimes WFP gets involved. I think where I find hope is creating systems that are outside of those two, and sometimes even outside the Working Families Party, which is why I was part of founding the People's Slate, really focused on running working class, activists, people who otherwise wouldn't be encouraged or able to run for office, connecting with community members who have experience and working with them to see what alternative routes exist outside of this two-party system. There are a lot of things these parties do, both Democrats, both Republican, that I think are problematic, but I think the answer is also looking at alternatives, right? At least for me, right? Seeing what's not working for me within one space and maybe building outside of that space with other like minds and seeing how we can build something else. So when I think about some of the recent decisions, I think about folks like DSA, folks like the People's Slate, and just other organizations who are stepping outside of the two-party system and really building power in other ways.
Hi, Stanley. My name's Megan. I have been following you for a while. You're fantastic to this Rochester community. There were two things in your presentation that really struck a chord for me. One thing mentioning the story of the student who was assaulted and was kicked out of her school. I am also a student who was assaulted many years ago now by a teammate who is now a coach of women, a young woman. I also suffered for about 4 or 5 years mentally from this. Another part of your presentation, you talked about the police being used as tactics to help people with mental health crises. I myself have been, the cops have been called on me by my parents who thought that that was going to help me in my mental health. And kind of going off of the questions that have been asked, I was actually at the No Kings rally today, and I kind of forgot about these two issues that are so dear to my heart. I kind of forget about these women's issues that are so near and dear to my heart because I'm so focused on getting rid of this administration. So I guess my question to you is, how do I still include those issues when I'm also trying to get the biggest picture, but also fighting for the little people as well as the big picture?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for sharing your story, Megan, and we're with you, and even outside of the space, I'm sure there's so many women here who would love to support you or learn how we can. It's hard to do all things at once. I have to remind myself of that all the time, but I try to find a couple of issues that I show up for regularly, and for the others, I have things on my calendar that remind me they are happening, and then I show up where I can. With what's happening in the federal government, it is a very significant crisis, but also in our communities, things like mental health, how police treat people, have always been a crisis, right? And those may endure even past a change in the federal government. So I try to stay tuned on both ends, right? something nationally, something locally, something at the state level. For me, mental health is the thread that draws that. For me, feminist and women's rights issues draw that thread. But it's hard. You can't do all of it, and all you can do is try.
Hi, Stanley. I'm Michelle. Nice to see you again. Same place I saw you last time, at this library. So I'm wondering, from your history, and that is the most adorable picture, but from your history, you did a lot of work outside of public office, and then you decided to run for public office. And I'm wondering if you can categorize the difference between the two and where you felt you could do the most, make the most difference. And obviously you ran for public office, so you probably thought there you could make the most difference. Was that true? And do you feel in any way restricted in a way that you didn't before you ran for office?
That is such a great question. And sometimes when I'm in City Hall, I'm like, who made me do this? Like, who is responsible for this pain and suffering I'm enduring in this moment? Because it couldn't be me, right? I think I have been most successful merging the two. Coming from the activist organizing world and merging that with how I legislate. For me, what that really means is when there's an issue that affects folks who may be unhoused, people who may be in recovery, the LGBTQ plus community, I always start with talking to the folks most impacted. And it makes everything clearer. It makes everything possible. None of the things I've managed to accomplish while in council has been because I'm Stanley or anything that I alone have done, right? It has always been with people. It has been with people who are directly impacted, people who have experience with writing legislation or lawyers, people who are just upset and want to get involved in the fight. So I think the intersection of community organizing and public office makes me a good legislator and also makes me a good community organizer, because now being in City Hall, I know people are not doing things because it's the right thing to do. People are doing things because community shows up and demands that they do it. So the two, the intersection. But some days in City Hall, whoa, it's hard.
Thank you.
Of course.
Any more questions for Stanley? All right. Thank you, Stanley, so much.
Thank you.
Make sure you grab some snacks on your way out. Thanks so much for coming out today.